and welcome to the channel. Today what we have is part 2 of a multi-part series related to Power Virtual Agents and the new solution support that was recently released. Now today what we're going to do is we're going to expand upon the previous video where we talked about solutions in general, but we're going to actually take advantage of solutions and Azure DevOps in order to promote these solutions across multiple environments. It allows us to move it from a dev to a build to a production environment. And so that's what we're going to focus on today. So with that said, let's get right into the content. So let's just talk a little bit about why this episode is important. In part 1 of this series, we did talk about solutions and how we can take a chatbot and include it in a solution that allows us to package it up and move it from one environment to another environment. We're going to build on top of that scenario, but what we're going to do is use Azure DevOps as a mechanism to go ahead and to pack and unpack our solution so that we can actually store it inside of a source code repository. So we've got the individual components essentially backed up there. And then what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are consistently moving them from one environment to another environment. So there's a little bit of setup that's required, but once we've got everything set up, it's very quick for us to go ahead and move our chatbots from one environment to another. And really that's what the focus of this specific episode is on. Before we dive deeper into the content, I wanted to let you know about an emerging community found at serverlessnotes.com. This is a community resource that covers best practices, tips, and latest announcements built on contributions by technology enthusiasts from around the globe. On serverlessnotes.com, you'll find content related to Power Automate, Azure Logic Apps, Azure Service Bus, Azure Functions, and much, much more. Serverlessnotes.com is brought to you by Serverless 360, a portal that is focused on operations and support for Microsoft Azure serverless resources. Now, this is a complementary tool to the Azure portal, and it helps organizations in supporting Azure serverless applications. You can find out more about Serverless 360 at serverless360.com. So if you haven't seen part 1 of this series, I do encourage you to go ahead and check that out and then come back to this video. I will include a link in the description, but essentially we talk about what is the process of actually including a chatbot into a solution. And typically how that works is you create a blank solution and then you would go ahead and add existing. And then when you select add existing, you would then select chatbot. You'll have the opportunity to choose your chatbot and then all of those assets will be brought in. Another thing that we talked about in that video that's super important, everything will fail if you don't follow this step, is that inside of an environment, like say your build environment, your test environment, your prod environment, you need to have a chatbot in there. There's some prerequisite like platform components that need to be deployed into those environments for all of this stuff to work. If you don't have it, you're not going to get the right results. So do just go ahead, create a new chatbot, and obviously it has all of the sample topics and that sort of thing. That's all you need. Once you've deployed your chatbot into that, like your new one, like the packaged one that we're going to talk about today, then you can go ahead and delete that other one if you want. Yeah, so that just includes a couple of the prerequisites. Make sure you go ahead and check that out. Now, today we're going to talk about Azure DevOps. And so if you're new to Azure DevOps, it essentially is a source code repository, but even so much more than that. What we do is we have tools and capabilities that just manage application lifecycle management, ALM, all up. So we've got things like pipelines, releases, test plans, and also planning. Don't discount all of the planning capabilities where you can build out your sprints and manage all of those different activities that are going on. Now, it is something that you can start out for free. There is basically a start free plan where it allows you and 4 other users, 5 total, where you can go ahead and use Azure DevOps for no charge. And then what happens is you can go ahead and add more seats. Here it is, it says $6 per user per month, which really is a bargain when you think about all of the value that you can accrue by using this specific tool. So that is a prerequisite of this lab and everything that I'm going to show you. In this case, I am using the free version. So everything that you're going to see in this video truly is something you can do at no cost, at least to start with anyways. Once you can, basically you can go ahead and sign up for Azure DevOps at dev.azure.com, basically logging in with your organizational account, and then you'll have the ability to go ahead and to create a project. And this is where you're going to store all of your solution packages for that specific project. So I'd kind of think of each of your chatbots is probably a project in my mind. but it kind of depends up to you how you want to go ahead and manage that. Now, another prerequisite, and this is really what makes all of this stuff work, is inside of the Azure DevOps Marketplace, there are some tools provided by Microsoft. These don't cost you anything. They're free, and they're called the Power Platform Build Tools. So you can go ahead and be able to find them inside of the Azure DevOps Marketplace. You go ahead and install them, and basically it's just installing them in your instance inside of DevOps. There's no local dependencies, and then what it's going to do is give us all of these different tasks that we can go ahead and take advantage of as we go ahead and build out our process. And another thing that we do need to do is, and I will walk through more of this in the video itself, the demo, but we do need to go ahead and create service connections. These are essentially connections that allow us to go into the different environments. So for example, I'm going to be building inside of dev. I need to go ahead and connect into that dev environment to actually be able to pull the package out. I need to pull that solution out and make it a package. So I need to naturally have access to that dev environment in order to do so. And we're going to use service connections to help with that. We will use a generic service connection. We need to provide the URL of the environment, and you can go ahead and find that out from the admin center inside of the Power Platform. And then we would go ahead and put in a username and password to connect into that environment. Do note, service principal is supported. I'll cover that in a future video. And so if accounts have multi-factor authentication enabled on them, you're not going to find success with the username password route. You're going to need to go into the service principal route, and that'll allow you to bypass MFA. The other thing for what we're going to show today is I've got 3 environments, so therefore I have 3 different service connections that I need to go ahead and build. One for my dev environment, which is like my starting point. Then I've got a build environment, and then I've got a production environment. So I need 3 different service connections to support all of the movement of the packages. Then what's going to happen is we're going to create 2 pipelines and then a release pipeline. And so what we can see here is step 1, we're going to create a pipeline that allows us to export from dev. And you can see all of the different activities that we're going to use here. We're going to export the solution, break it apart, and then commit the solution to a source code repository. So we're going to have all of those different artifacts stored individually inside of the repo, the source code repository. Then step 2 is we're going to go ahead and we're going to take all of those individual items from our source code repository, pack them back up together, and then we're going to import them into a build environment. At that point, we could go do additional testing. If we wanted, we could share our chatbot with someone else and have them go run it through like a web browser or a mobile application. And then what we'll be able to do is we will export it from that build environment and then publish the pipeline artifact. So basically a zip file that contains our entire solution. Then lastly, step number 3, we are going to then take that package that we published the pipeline artifact here as the last step, and we're going to go ahead and import it into our prod environment. And then that's going to allow us to use our chatbot into production. Now, there are a few sort of known, I call them workarounds. They're just known issues that you have to address. Whenever we're talking about Power Automate, we do need to go ahead and establish connections in each of the downstream environments. And so what you might see, and you likely will see, is when you import your solution into that next environment, you might see this error message that says we ran into a problem importing some flows. So technically the flows are fine. You will be able to go ahead and find them. And what you can do is just inside of your chatbot canvas, just click on the link that says view Power Automate flow. And once you do that, you click on that button, it'll take you right into the Flow Maker portal, the Power Automate Maker portal, where you will find the exact flow that has just been imported. Now, what's going to happen is you have to go ahead and establish connections. And so you think about it, it does make sense. Like, let's take the example of SharePoint. SharePoint, you likely have 3 different environments as well. One for build, one for dev, and one for production. And as part of that, you're going to have like a URL for each of those different instances of SharePoint Online. And as a result, you probably have different credentials that you want to use to connect to dev versus test versus production. So you do need to go ahead and establish those connections. And so as a result, that's why you're going to see this specific error message that takes place. Now, one thing I would also call out, ideally you should be when you are promoting solutions into upstream environments, you should be importing them as managed. Until this issue is fixed, it's best, in my opinion, to go ahead and just use unmanaged. Because what's going to happen is if you try to do managed, that implies that you can't make any changes to the artifact that you've just published. If you go ahead and make a change, what happens is that change gets stored in an unmanaged layer anyways. And in this case, it'll get managed in the default solution. So I feel for now, it's best to just go ahead and use unmanaged. Now, lastly, the other thing you need to be aware of, and this is for good reason too, is because you have to go into Power Automate and make changes to your connection, you can't have a flow that will run, right? Like it's not going to run because it's broken. Like there's no connections that allow it to execute. So once you've cleaned up your connections, then what you want to do is go in and turn your flow on and then go back into Power Virtual Agents, just hit refresh and allow it to go ahead and ping that underlying flow again, and then life will be good. So just something to be aware of in each of the environments that you deploy your solution to, you do need to go ahead and watch out for these steps. All right, so with that prerequisite information out of the way, let's go ahead, let's dive into a demo, and I'll show you exactly how all of this stuff works. All right, so right now I'm in the admin center, the Power Platform admin center, admin.powerplatform.com. I just wanted to ensure that you knew how to go ahead and retrieve the URL for your environment based upon the service connections that you're going to need to establish. And so what you'll do is for every environment, just click on the environment and then you'll see the environment URL. And so what we do is we just want to copy this URL out, and when we're creating our service connection, that's the value that we would go ahead and provide. So with that out of the way, I'm going to just flip over to DevOps. Here's the project that I've created before. Probably best just to go and create your service connections right off the bat. And you would do that by clicking on project settings and then service connections. And then you would go ahead and just click on new service connection, generic. And then this is where you would paste that URL from your environment. And then you're going to want to do that for each of the 3 different environments that we're going to be targeting today. Now over to pipelines. And so what we will do is if we click on this rocket ship here and then click on pipelines, this is where we're going to establish our 2 pipelines. Now, do note I've got 2 projects going on here. This is for just another initiative I was exploring ALM for, just around UI flows and flows. So for today, PVA, these are the 2 that we're going to focus on today. And so I've created one and I've just numbered it number 1 so I remember what step is first. And I want to go ahead and click edit on this pipeline and then leverage all of these Power Platform build tools. And so you might wonder, how do I get access to those? Once you've installed the Power Platform build tools from the marketplace, which you find over here, this is where you would be able to go ahead and find these. And then what you can just do is just type in Power Platform, and then you're going to see all of these different tasks that are available for us. Okay, so the first one, and you always need to include this, is you need to go ahead and make sure you have the Power Platform tool installer. Now, do note, and this is probably temporary. So what's happened was I was using default versions, which is typically a good idea, but there has been a bug in a previous version, 0.39. And so when I was talking with the product group, they had advised me until this gets published, go ahead and use 44. So I think in due time, maybe even by the time this video comes out, that might be fixed. But this is how you want to make sure you're at least on this version. So if you're using default and it's already higher, then I would assume that you're going to be okay. But just something to be aware of. And next up, what we're going to do is we're going to export the solution. This is where we want to ensure that we have the correct service connection established, and we can go ahead and select it from a dropdown. Then what we're going to include is our solution name and our build solution outputs file. Now, these are essentially variables. This is an out-of-the-box kind of like global variable. The solution name is something that I have gone ahead and created myself. So I go into variables and I construct a variable called solution name, and then this is the name of my solution, which I will get from the Solution Explorer, where we have to go ahead and create our solution. Next up, we want to unpack the solution, and similarly, some of this is just out of the box in terms of like the staging directory, but we do want to include our solution name, And then obviously we want to be able to output it to a target folder. And we're going to go ahead and use these values. I mentioned this before. For now, I'm using unmanaged. And then I'm going to go ahead and commit to a repo. So this is just configuration that is made available as part of the Microsoft documentation that is now available. I'll be sure to include a link to that content as part of the description itself. And so this represents step number 1, which is going to export from dev. And then we'll now look at step number 2, which is the build solution. And in this case, this is where we're going to go ahead. Once again, we need the tool installer. And I'm also using I'm not using the default version here as well, just in the interim. But this is where we're going to go ahead and pack our solution. We're going to basically take all of the individual artifacts, pack it into a solution so that we can go ahead and then import it. And so here, once again, these are just some of the default values that you're going to want to go ahead and use, and then obviously using that variable again to represent the name of your solution. When we import it, we do need to flip our service connection to make sure we're pointed at build, so do be aware of that. And then make sure everything is consistent in terms of where we're pulling the solutions from. You can also import it as an asynchronous operation, which would allow you to perform other activities while the import is taking place. Then once it's imported, we're going to export the solution. Once again, we're going to use the build service connection, and this will then give us a package that we can basically persist as a pipeline artifact, so that when we pull it into a prod environment, we're not actually packing the solution again. It's already been done for us. And so we're going to go ahead and configure that. And at this point, we're going to make that artifact available inside of this specific directory and with this specific name. So this is a name that I have provided myself. Then lastly, we're going to go ahead and create a new release pipeline. So you'll find that in this menu over here. And this is the PVA related one. Now this is something that you do want to go ahead and set. And what this is going to do is this is going to align to the previous step where we said we're going to publish that artifact. You're going to have the ability to go browse for it and just make sure that that's set up correctly, because then this release pipeline knows where to go ahead and to select that package. Then what's going to happen once we have the package is we now can go ahead and use that package to deploy. Now in this case, we're going to import it into production. So we need to make sure we have our production service connection, and then we can go ahead and browse where our file will be located. And that links to previously where I had established, like, this is where you're going to go find that specific output file. So with that said, I can now go ahead and run these. And let me, before I do that, just give you just a little bit of a breakdown of where we're at on the solution side itself. So I'm in dev, my first environment. I have a solution, and as part of that solution, I went ahead and added an existing chatbot. And so that exists here. I would have gone through this experience much like I did in part 1 of the video. Here we can see all of the different topics, the bot entity, the chatbot itself, and then we have our flow. And so in this case, we've got a very simple chatbot where I can request what is the weather for a specific location. And so that's basically an initial solution itself. So what we can do is we can go ahead and we can run this, and I'm going to pause. This will take, I would say, between 1 and 2 minutes for you to run. And so I'll pause the video while this takes place, but I'm going to go ahead and let this run, and then we'll come back and see where we're at. Okay, we can see that took just over a minute for that to succeed. So that's great. That's step number 1. Let's now go to step number 2, and let's go ahead and import this into our build environment. So let's go ahead and click on run. Once again, I'm going to pause the video. This will take between 1 to 2 minutes as well. Okay, so that job finished in just around 2 minutes. So let's just flip over to our Solution Explorer, and we're going to flip over to our build environment. And we can see that we now have our solution here, my PVA solution ALM. Let's flip back to Azure DevOps, and now let's go ahead and run our release pipeline that'll move this into prod. So with my PVA pipeline selected, I'm going to go ahead and create a release. I can provide a description, and then click on create. And now this is going to run for us as well. It's currently being queued. So once again, this is a fairly quick operation, probably be about a minute or so, and I'll be back. Okay, so that's now complete. So let's go ahead and let's flip over to our prod environment. And sure enough, we now have our solution deployed for us there. Okay, so let's head over to Power Virtual Agents. And what you'll notice is the robot is where we can go ahead and select the environment that we want to be in and then see what bots exist. So this was, a tab that I had opened before I went ahead and deployed all of these assets. So if I refresh this, we should see that we have a new bot that we can go ahead and select. And sure enough, we do. So let's go ahead, let's click this specific bot. So here's where we can go ahead and see the weather chatbot, and then we can go into the authoring canvas. And so this is where you're going to want to pay attention to your flow itself. Now, just so you do know, is this was a flow that I had previously imported and then had deleted for the sake of this video. But we can see that when it's imported, it is imported as it's off. It hasn't been turned on. It's currently off. So let's go ahead, let's click on edit, and we can see that we've got a connection that we have to establish. Now, I've already created a connection previously, but I have to associate it with this flow. Then I have to go ahead and click on save. So let's now head back to the flow's main page, and let's go ahead and let's turn it on. And we can also see there's a status indicator here that says off. So let's go ahead, let's click this button and turn it on. It'll take a few seconds. Oh, there it is. That was pretty quick. And now our bot is ready to be used. Let's go over here. I've just found it best just to go ahead and hit refresh, just to ensure that the PVA canvas can actually communicate to the flow itself. So now we can go ahead and let's just run this specific bot. And so we can just ask a question like, what is the temperature? And then we're going to get prompted for what city do we want the temperature for. So in this case, I'll select Calgary, where I am. And we can see that today it's partly sunny, and the high will be 20 degrees Celsius. So that's not Fahrenheit, it's Celsius. So not a horrible day, but not an awesome day either, but not too bad. And so there we go. That is essentially the demo. And so I'll leave some more documentation that you can go ahead and check out if you're just interested in more of the step-by-step that I went through here. But as you can see, this did allow us to quickly transition our bot from a dev environment to a build environment to a production environment. Yes, we do have to touch if there's flows. If there aren't flows, then really there's nothing to touch at all. But all in all, this allows us to enforce consistency, and we've got a very standardized process. So hopefully you did enjoy this video. As I said, I'll be adding another video to the series just to talk about the service principles, because I think that is a pretty important capability, especially when you're dealing with enterprise customers and organizations where they've got multi-factor authentication enabled, which is a good thing. It's certainly not a bad thing. All right, so thanks for checking out this video, and we'll see you later.